It's fine. It felt good enough to where I felt I could go back in.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is also brought to you by Mack Weldon. Smart underwear for smart guys. Use the promo code LOFB for 20% off. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We had 4 games on Tuesday, so not a very heavy slate there. But we've got 13 games on Wednesday, so there's a lot of stuff to get to in the second half of the show. So, of course,
let's get to it.
But before we actually get to it, Michael, a couple of things. I mentioned yesterday, if you didn't hear yesterday's show, just the Thanksgiving timetable, there will be a show that recaps all of Wednesday's games, and that show will also preview all of Friday's games. So there will be one show for the Thursday, Friday that covers both the preview and the review, and there'll be no new show come out on Friday. Then back in business for Saturday, Sunday, and every day all the way through until whenever the next day is. The NBA doesn't play Christmas Eve, I believe. So that's the schedule for the podcast. One other thing is, if you guys, and there's plenty of people who are listening to this podcast, and I do always appreciate that, if you guys are looking for a way to support the podcast, I've just started up a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/redrock_bball. And over there, there's different levels of support you can provide to the show, starting at $1 a month, and different rewards that you can get, ranging from free t-shirts, priority access to listener leagues, Patreon-only chat services, one-on-one monthly video conference regarding your team, detailed analysis of your team, that sort of stuff. So if you are interested in supporting the show in any way, you can do it over at patreon.com/redrock_bball, and it's a way that you can help support this show if it is something that you do enjoy. Obviously, there's no pressure to do it. The show is here anyway, but if it's something that you can do, that you can afford, and there are a few perks for doing that as well. So that's just something I've started up today, so we'll see how it goes. All right, the NBA action from Tuesday. We'll start with the monstrous line of the night, and it doubles as the waiver wire line of the night, and it is Timmy Frazier in New Orleans. He was amazing. He tied a career high with scoring with 21 points. That's obviously not high, but this is Tim Frazier we're talking about. 21 points. He hit 3 triples. He had 5 boards. He had a season-high 14 assists. He had 3 steals, and he was 7 of 12 from the field. Not much more that really we can say about Frazier. That's a fantastic performance. It's a monstrous performance, in fact. He is available in league still. This is what I was talking about in terms of dropping him. Saying that let's not make a too early drop on him. I would rather just hold and see what happens when Holiday comes back. Or as people like, oh, Holiday's back at the end of the week, let's drop him on the Monday. And I was like, let's just hold. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how they use him. It hasn't been Frazier that's lost out. It's E'Twaun Moore. It's Buddy Hield. And Frazier and Drew are playing a lot together. Now, Frazier's minutes will start to come down. Drew's playing under 30 at the moment. That will come up. And when Tyreke Evans comes back, which is looking like in about 2 weeks, Frazier will also lose a little bit of playing time. But for now, what he's giving you is amazing numbers. 12 points, 3.5 boards, a 3, 8 assists, 1.1 steals in 31 minutes. I think we can expect those minutes to come back a bit, but he's a top 50 player so far this season. So I would expect a drop-off. I'd expect a drop-off in his ball handling, but there's no reason to cut bait yet because Tyreke might come back and be on a 15-minute limit. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with him coming back. Him and Drew might continue to share the backcourt for 30-plus minutes each. So there's no reason to drop a player like Frazier at this point, and there wasn't a reason really to drop him before Holiday come back. But it is interesting that his minutes were actually getting decreased before Holiday came back, and then when Holiday arrived, they went back up again. So that's a little bit of a weird situation from Alvin Gentry, but it is what it is, and we have to react, I guess, to what's happening and the decisions that these coaches make, and that's the exact decision that Alvin Gentry is making at the moment with Timmy Frazier. So if he's around on your waiver wire, he's an absolute ad. Of course he is, and we'll see what happens when Evans comes back. But for now, it doesn't look like there's any interruption to the supply you've had from Tim Frazier so far this season. Now I'm going to take just a minute to talk to you about a new sponsor for the podcast. And I always like when we get new sponsors because it's an extra way that you can show the sponsors that we as a podcast, as a listener group, we mean business. And today's sponsor is MacWeldon.com. MacWeldon.com, it's a website, clearly. All right, so what it is, it's a site they sell underwear. Men's underwear, men's t-shirts, socks, tracksuit pants, just comfortable undergarments and loungy sort of gear. And I'll tell you what, I'm almost 100% sure it's going to be better than what you're currently wearing. That's what Mack Weldon does. I've ordered some, I've got some. It's fantastic quality gear. Bought myself some underwear. I'm sure you all care about the underwear that I'm wearing. Bought Ben some socks. I don't wear socks really ever, so I didn't buy myself any socks. But some underwear, some t-shirts, really good quality stuff from Mack Weldon. It's smart design. The fabrics are really good. They feel fantastic, very, very soft. And the shopping experience is straightforward. No concerns, no issues with Mack Weldon. This is stuff you're buying direct from a website, so obviously you're not supplementing their rent in stores and things like that. It's the most comfortable stuff that you could ever possibly want. The hoodies, there's hoodies there as well, undershirts, t-shirts, socks, underwear, all that sort of stuff. They've even got a special line of underwear, silver underwear, that helps to absorb odors, which some of you may require. I'm not here to judge. You never know. But and shirts as well with the silver, sweating, that sort of problem as well. It's so comfortable, and Mack Weldon thinks that their products are so comfortable, and they are, that even if you don't like your first pair, you can keep it, and they'll give you a refund. So you can go on there and say, you know what, I don't like this. They'll give you a refund, and you can hang on to it. That's how confident they are in the quality of their products. Not only do they look good, and they do, they're well put together, great fabrics, but they perform well too. They do everything, in any sort of situation where you're going to wear it under a suit, you're going to wear it to work out, Mack Weldon gets the job done. So for you guys, all the Locked On Fantasy Basketball listeners, if you go to MacWeldon.com, you can use the promo code, which is LOFB, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, LOFB, and you get 20% off an order. It's brilliant stuff. So go to MacWeldon.com, have a look, and I can assure you won't be disappointed with the products that these guys send you. And you get it at a pretty significant discount as well. 20% is a fair whack. So you're getting great stuff, you're getting them at a cheaper price, and you're helping to support the podcast. Thanks for Mack Weldon for coming on board and supporting the show, and I know you guys are going to check out their stuff. You've liked all the other sponsors that I've thrown out there, and there's no reason that you won't like what Mack Weldon's got to offer, because I can tell you now, they're a fantastic brand, and the stuff that they're providing is really, really impressive. So go and check out Mack Weldon. The other thing you might want to check out is Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison. He's going to talk about what's happened with his team recently with the reacquisition of Drew. They've won 3 straight games. Jake's going to be talking about that on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. The play of Frazier, the elimination of Buddy Hield almost from the rotation, the play of Terrence Jones, the injury to Anthony Davis, which I'm sure plenty of you people listening cringed when you either watched or heard and saw Davis crash into the stands and smack himself on the chairs. Even I did, to be honest. And I'm very anti the talk of Davis being soft, but when he jumped, I just what on earth are you doing? Why are you jumping into the crowd to save a ball when there's really no need for it? It was as dumb a thing as he could do. I understand his commitment, and he is balls out all the time. But man, if you're diving that far and there's no one else around you, you shouldn't be ending up in the 3rd or 4th row. But it's all good. Jake's going to have any further information on that on Locked On Pelicans, plus the other stuff that is happening down in New Orleans. The young gun of the night. Yes, it is Kristaps Porzingis. 31 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 triples and a block, 13 of 23 from the field, and he hit both of his free throws. Probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, I made the statement that I said, is it possible that Kristaps is the Knicks' best player? And I mentioned that some people had taken issue with that. How much doubt have we got now? He's very good. Now, the Knicks, inexplicably, they won the game, but inexplicably, they went away from using Kristaps down the stretch, which is ridiculous. The dude, over the last 2 weeks, is averaging 22.5 points. He's hitting over 2 threes a game, 8 boards, a block, a steal on 51 and 83%. He can do whatever he wants offensively, and he's got massive scope for these block numbers to improve, and I think he can do that. His shooting is tremendous. This is very similar shooting numbers to what he did in Spain, and obviously corrected any issues he had from last year. He's a rock-solid second rounder who is going to be in consideration for a top 15 player, maybe as early as this year. But next season, we'll be talking about Kristaps as a, hey, do I grab him at the end of the first round? That's the sort of trajectory his career is on. He looks unstoppable for lots of the time with Kristaps. He's pretty good. I think that's all we need. I'm glad I've got him on. I'm going to count how many teams I've got him on. Probably not as many as I'd like. Let's have a look. 1, 2. I've only got him on 2 teams. That's disappointing. 3 teams. My mistake. Three teams. But that's all right. I've got a fair selection of Kristaps across my leagues, and I'm very much enjoying what I've had from him so far, especially after that one ridiculous 4-shot attempt game where you went, the Knicks are going to kill him, and he's bounced back and been an absolute animal since then. Speaking of animals, in the in the negative way, maybe more of a dung beetle, Kent Bazemore is your dud of the night. Baze had the triple one, so it's really he did have a triple one. 1 point, 1 rebound, 1 assist. That's not the good triple one. That is the worst triple one that you can possibly have, unless your other triple one is 1 field goal attempt, 1 free throw attempt, 1 turnover. He's close to that, but a 1 point, 1 rebound, 1 assist triple one is putrid. Now, you know my take on Bazemore. I do not believe he is a good player. I thoroughly believe that he is not a good player. He has had moments this year. I still think that you want to own him, but say I'm in a dynasty league, if he puts together a string of big games, I'm selling him, because with guys like Taurean Prince and DeAndre Bembry, and even Tim Hardaway Jr. to a degree, blokes who are 6 years younger than him, who are probably going to be better players and may already be better players than him coming up behind, Bazemore's role is not secure to me moving forward. He's playing under 28 minutes a game this season. He played under 28 last season. Not much is improving. And what is happening is that his shooting is regressing to the numbers that we saw before last year's unsustainable hot start. He's never really been a good shooter. And last season, he was sort of coming out of nowhere with some of these shooting percentages, but it's dropped off. I do imagine it improves from here. This is a real stinker. This is not an absolute must-drop situation for Bazemore by no stretch. And he's not quite in the drop zone, but I'm talking long-term when we look at overall value of these guys. He's just not a good player, in my opinion. And he falls in that Marvin Williams category. They're just not good guys. Well, that's not true. I'm sure they're great guys. And Marvin, from what I hear, is a great bloke, and Bazemore seems like an absolute top-notch ripper. But in terms of what they are as a basketball player, Bazemore's best suited is just 7th or 8th man. That's where he should be on a good team. And unfortunately, he's put into the Hawks situation where is he their 5th best player? Is it Korver that's 5th or 4th? Whatever. He's one of those, and he's not fulfilling that role, and I don't really think he ever will. But his defense has been really good this season in terms of his defensive statistics, and that's keeping him ownable. But it's always a long-term thing to watch with Kent, because as I mentioned, he's just not a good player, and that's my hot take for the day. I know plenty of people disagree with that as well, but yeah, I don't. Let's look at the games. Let's look at them in more detail now. The first one is this Pelicans and Hawks game, which dominated the nightly awards. Drew only the 27 minutes, but 15, 4 and 4, 2 steals and a block. Absolutely no reason to complain about anything we've had from Holiday in his 3 games since returning. Really, really great stuff. And you would feel at some point that he's going to retake the starting job. But if you remember last season, Elvin Gentry played him off the bench in February, March for stretches of time. And I don't really care too much as long as he's getting the 30-ish minutes. It still doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me, but whatever, as long as he's getting big minutes. Etuan Moore's minutes have been cut. He's at 23 here, 15, 3 and 2 with 3 triples. Shot the ball well, and he is a key part of what they want to do. Yeah, significantly better than Bud Hield. As for Bud, 8 minutes for Bud, 0 points. I think the most damning statistic for Bud is that Anthony Brown, yes, plenty of you will not know that Anthony Brown plays for the Pelicans. Some of you might not know who Anthony Brown is. Anthony Brown was the second-round draft choice of the Los Angeles Lakers last season, who started a couple of games in place of Kobe, and then he Brown broke his foot. And the Lakers cut him in preseason so they could keep Thomas Robinson and Metta World Peace. Brown was signed during the week, and both Brown and Hield played 8 minutes. I know it was a blowout, so that gave Brown some minutes, but in a blowout, Buddy Hield can only get 8 minutes. It's a real worry, and we'll talk about it later, but Dell Demps must be feeling just having a little bit of a tickle of a flame right in his arsehole at the moment, because he has to be feeling it. because it was a bad decision at the time to take Bud at pick 6, and especially if you're looking at after today, you're saying, how is this possible? How did that decision get made? And it's not a hindsight decision. And it's not a hindsight criticism from me, because at the time, this is stupid. This is a ridiculous decision. You should not have taken him there. And it looks worse today. Davis only played the 19 minutes because of that knee where he dove into the chairs. 13 and 3. He still had a steal and 3 blocks, so his numbers weren't horrible. They obviously weren't where you want them to be. And Terrence Jones overcame illness to play 28 minutes, 17 and 6 with a steal and a block. Great numbers from Jones. The inconsistency is always going to be a concern. And he did get some extra run and extra opportunities with Davis sitting out for basically half of the game. So what does that mean for Jones? I think you still have to own him, but he's just as likely to play 20 minutes and have 6 points in the next game as he is to have 17 and 6, which he did here. So when Davis and Holiday are going, there's not going to be a huge amount for Jones. He's going to be up and down, but by all means, he's an ownable player. Solly Hill hit 3 triples for his 11 points in 26 minutes off the bench. Nice numbers from Solly, but he is obviously a deeper league guy, as is Dante Cunningham, who chimed in with 3 of his own blocks. For the Hawks, Kyle Korver hit 4 triples, 14 points, 4 assists. A good night from Korver. Red hot shooting. I guess he's fine to own in 12-team leagues, but I do not believe that if he's on a waiver wire, you need to go and grab him or anything along those lines. I don't think that's what we should be looking at with Korver. Dwighty Howard. And look, basically this Hawks box score, they were smashed. They were down by 40, I believe, in the third quarter. So the minutes aren't there. 19 for Dwight, 23 for Millsap, 27 for Schroeder, which is important for Schroeder because he had 1 point in the last game. He went 14, 4, and 7 here. So a good bounce back from him. But otherwise, there's not much to really report. We did have Tabo Cephalosha back in the lineup. We got to see a little bit of DeAndre Bembry, some more Torian Prince, but not much to really care too heavily about this Hawks game. It was an embarrassing loss. They were smacked in the first 5 minutes, but for fantasy, not much we can really look at and care about there. The Portland Trailblazers and the New York Knicks. The Blazers are not good. They're not bad, but they're not good. And the loss of Al-Farouq Aminu has hurt them in a huge way, which I don't think many people saw as being that impactful, but it's really killed them. Now, Ed Davis replaced him. It's his third start, and he had a monster. 33 minutes for Davis, 14 and 10 with 2 blocks. But we do have to realise that in the previous two starts, Davis played about 20 minutes in each of those games and did nothing. So this was a case of Davis hitting every shot. He was 7 of 9. It got red hot, and Stotts just went with it and continued to play him big minutes. So is Ed Davis a must-own? I don't think that's the case. We've got 2 games of nothing, 1 game of a big performance, and Stotts, much like a Brad Stevens, is just going to rotate big men and just play these different guys different minutes. Last game it was a big double-double from Myers Leonard. Today, Leonard had 7 points in 19 minutes. You had a 15-minute night from Noah Vonleh the other day. He played 6 here. It's just going to be a case-by-case basis. So no need to rush and grab Ed Davis, despite the notification or the notation of him being a starter. The previous 2 games gave you 20 minutes. Dame, 22, 5, and 6 with 2 steals and 2 triples. Just not really feeling it to a huge degree. And CJ at 16, 5, and 5 on 17 shots. Not a very efficient night from CJ there. Mo Harkless, a correct triple one from Mo. And he also had 15 points and 8 boards. I believe in Mo as a 12-team league guy. Not many people do, but I think that he should be owned. And Mason Plumlee, just the 28 for him, 9, 9, and 4 in those minutes. Evan Turner only played 24 minutes, got relatively hot down the end, 11 points, 2 assists, and 1 steal, but continues to struggle. And Alan Crabb, I don't care how much money they paid him, he's not a good player. 23 minutes, 7 points, 3 rebounds. He's not a good fantasy player. He's a decent real-life player, but he's not a player on a conference final team that's playing 30 minutes. That's just, I don't think he's good enough for that. On to the Knicks. Derrick Rose hit the game ceiling shot, I guess you'd call it. 18, 4, and 5 with 2 steals in 28 minutes for Rose. A pretty good performance, really efficient stuff from him, and that's obviously great for his owners and his fans. Brandon Jennings looked impressive as well. Only the 4 points for Jennings, but another double-digit assist night, having 11 there and 2 steals. And when you're getting double-digit assists, your name is on radars. It has to be looked at. Because anyone that can go out there and throw out 5 or 6 assists is worth it. If you throw out 10, it's a big deal. 11 assists and 2 steals almost gets you into 12-team league value, even if you do nothing in the other categories. So we've got to look at Jennings. He's not a absolute must-add guy, but he should be a decent high-priority player that if you've got some garbage sitting at the end of your roster, that I'm trying to think of a player who is sitting on some rosters. That look, if you've got Nick Young in a 12-team league, yeah, get Jennings and just see how it pans out with this this smaller lineup, this dual backcourt, that Jennings getting this extra run. Mallow had 17 and 6 with 3 triples, a steal, and a block. Courtney Lee, if you've got Courtney Lee, I'll drop Courtney Lee for Brandon Jennings in a heartbeat. 27 minutes for Lee, 5 and 4 with a steal and a block. He just does nothing, and this has basically been his career. Jeff Hornacek, well, I talked about this yesterday, that no matter what happens with the backup centres, who are now the starting centres, given Noah's still sick, they're just going to alternate minutes, it appears. And it happened here. We had Billy Hernan Gomez, who played 29 in the last game. He played just 21. He went 9 and 4, and he had a pretty good plus-minus, a positive plus-minus. Whereas unfortunately, Hornacek's cock didn't look quite as rigid in defence. 4 and 5 for Kylo Quinn in 24 minutes, a steal, not his best night, and even with Noah out, these guys are just 16 to 18 team league guys. Only Noah and Lance Thomas did not play in this game. Chicago and Denver, what a weird game. The Bulls flying, then the bench comes in and does nothing, can't stop anybody. And then the Butler and the starters come back in and bring it back to equal. Just so much weird stuff happening. Butler was great, 35, 8 and 5, 2 blocks and 2 triples. Rondo almost triple-doubled and triple-1. That's a big line from Rondo. 13, 11 and 8, a triple-1. Still makes some ridiculous decisions and is still a harmful player on the court. But as long as Hoiberg is going to play him and he's going to give him 30 minutes, which I've got no reason to think this won't be the case, the stats are going to be there. They won't be there to the same level as last season, and you can't expect him to be a 6 of 11 shooter for the 13 points that he had here today. But the numbers will be there, so he is still worth owning, obviously. Dwayne Wade, 22 and 3, 2 triples, a steal, a block, a big night from him. And Rob Lopez, 6 blocks for Lopez, a steal, 12 points and 8 rebounds, big numbers, and he has really turned it on over the last couple of weeks. A double-double from Taj, had 12 and 10, and Nick Mirotic went from playing 37 minutes down to 22 minutes. 11 and 3, had a triple-1. So what I continue to say about Mirotic is the potential's there, the production is partially there, the minutes just aren't. But it's very frustrating. It depends on who I'm adding, but there's very unlikely to be someone on your wire with higher upside than Mirotic. So you might say, I'll drop him for a stream. I can understand that. But if you're looking to add him, the upside is definitely there. Now, whether he can play these minutes is another story, because he only got 22 in a game where Bob Portis played just 8 minutes and we didn't see any Chris Felicio at all, and there was no Doug McDermott, and there was no Michael Carter-Williams. So that's a little bit of a concern for Mirotic, but I don't believe in Isaiah Cannon, even though they don't play the same position. That will be where Carter-Williams gets some of his minutes and where McDermott maybe gets some of those minutes as well. But I'm finding it harder and harder to see how Hoiberg, given the way that he loves running things at the moment, is going to get Mirotic 27 minutes plus. The upside is clearly there, but it is going to be hard to see this really translating into anything. Cannon was brutal, missed the game-winning shot, or game-tying shot, I believe. 2 points in his 18 minutes. Denzel Valentine did not score. I still think that Valentine needs more playing time. He looks good when he's out there. He just doesn't. He hasn't been racking up the stats just at this point. On to the Nuggets. Yusuf Nurkic played 29 minutes, back in the good graces there. 14 and 14, 4 assists and 2 blocks. And while he's rolling, then clearly you own him. And the Nuggets are going away from Ken Fareed, whose ridiculous stat lines and defensive performances have dropped off, because newsflash, he's not good. And this is what I expect from Ken Fareed. 5 and 4 in 15 minutes for Fareed. 2 steals, 1 assist, but he played 15 minutes. He doesn't need to play these big minutes because he's not good. So he is not a must-own player to me. He's owned in 85% of leagues, too high. Moutier struggled, 5 points, 3 assists in 27 minutes. Will Barton played 26 minutes, also struggled, 3 of 13. Put him in the Kent Bazemore class. He's not as good as what people think he is. And with Gaz Harris returning in a month, maybe, Barton's upside is minimal. He is not someone that I'm adding with the hope that things get better. I've had that question a lot. What's the outlook for Barton? His minutes will be ramped up after his injury. They might for 2 weeks, and then they'll come back down, because Gaz Harris is a significantly better player than him, and Jamal Murray is looking amazing. to be honest, and this is what I was talking about with Dale Demps. To take Buddy Hield over Jamal Murray was laughable at the time. It looks ridiculous here. Now, Murray did not hit a shot in his first 4 games. And since then, I believe he's shooting 40% from 3, 45% from 3 even. He had 24 points in 22 minutes here, 3 triples, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. He's going to have defensive issues at times, yes. But man, his ability to score, to get into the lane, to pass, he's got great vision. He's going to be a real player, this guy. Is he a 12-team league guy at the moment? Well, I did talk about him yesterday or the day before and say, you know what? The upside is there with him. And given he's producing these 3-pointers at such a high clip and his percentages are decent, it's not a bad guy to look at owning. He's got value. And he is the reason that Will Barton is not going to maintain the role that he had last season. Because if Michael Malone is fair income with his team moving forward, and I understand it takes Murray a bit of time, but Murray should be playing these Barton minutes. If Barton's playing 27 minutes and Murray's playing 20, it should be 27 Murray, it should be 20 Barton. Will can play a little bit at the 3, and if they phase Kenneth Faried more out of the rotation, you'll see more Gallo and more Wilson Chandler at the 4, opening up some minutes on the wing. But I can also see a Moutier, Harris, Murray 1-2-3 combination at times. It might struggle a little bit defensively. Harris is a very good perimeter defender, so he might be able to move up, but it depends, I guess, on who they're matching up against on the wing there. But it is going to limit what Barton can do. I love what Murray's doing. I think today I tweeted out, I think after he hit his first shot, Murray's going to be good. And then he had 14 points in about 2 minutes and made me look like I knew what I was talking about, but that doesn't always happen. Big night from Murray. Huge potential for him. He is in the top 4 players out of this draft class, no doubt in my mind, and a significant chance to be the second best guy up there with Simmons, Bender, and Ingram as the top 4 guys in this rookie class. And he's showing it a lot quicker than what I anticipated, and he's going to be putting the pressure on Barton. And I wouldn't be shocked if Barton is Buddy Hield at some point and plays 10 minutes a game because we're getting a lot of Murray. Now, the other way that we can get minutes from Murray is eliminate Jameer Nelson. He had 10, 4, and 7 with 2 triples in 21 minutes, and he was solid, and he's continuing to really defy common sense for a lot of the play that he's putting in. But at some point, there'll be times when we get Murray playing at the 1, we'll get Harris playing at the 2 with Gallo, Chandler, and Nurkic, Jokic. A lot of options for this team. The 2 guys who are going to lose out in the end are going to be Barton and they're going to be Faried. And Nelson. Juancho Hernan-Gomez, really like this kid as well. And Nick Jokic, only the 18 minutes for Jokic. But this is exactly why we got excited about Jokic and why we should have gotten excited. 18 minutes, but 8, 8, and 3 with a steal and a block. That is still brilliant numbers in limited minutes. His shots are falling again. He looks more confident. Him and the bench unit, him and Murray were unstoppable in this game. If Jokic is on your wire, you have to grab him. You have to, and you have to hold. And Nurkic did have a good game here, but Jokic is the superior player in basically every aspect aside from rim protection. And that's an important part of basketball, obviously. But I think we're going to start seeing more Jokic and less Nurkic as the season moves on. And Jokic that's 3 games in a row where he's really put up some pretty decent numbers, and I'm very happy about it. The last game of the night, the Thunder and the Lakers. Russ, 34, 8, and 13. 4 triples and 2 steals. Getting it done as per usual. And we got a big Steve Adams game. He'd been almost invisible in the last couple. 20 and 6 with a steal and a block for Steve. And Vic Oladipo only had 14 points. But what we were really crying out for Oladipo to do is start giving us the other numbers. Well, 4 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, 2 triples. This is the Victor Oladipo that I drafted early. And he's really got it together recently. Enes Kanter, just the 19 minutes, 10 and 5. I don't believe that he's necessarily a must-hold player. It's just finding it harder and harder for him to get enough minutes these days. Joffrey Lavernier, especially with him playing some extra time, 12 and 7 for Joffrey. Hit a couple of threes, had a steal and a block, and he's really starting to blossom. So the value of Kanter is significantly dipping. Domantas Sabonis, 3, 4, and 3. Only the 22 minutes. He's starting, but he's just not providing really anything in that playing time. And a big defensive game from Robertson, 2 steals and 2 blocks, but not much in those other areas. He's very much a Tony Allen defensive streaming sort of player. So Marjay Kristen was back from his concussion. He only played the 4 minutes though, as the Thunder went without a traditional point guard for big chunks of the game and run guys like Alex Abrines and Oladipo as the point guard. Not that he's not necessarily a traditional point guard, but I suppose they sort of phased him out of being a point guard in Orlando last season. For the Lakers, there was no D'Angelo Russell, and there will be no D'Angelo Russell for Wednesday. So Jose Calderon got the start, and he was much better in this one. 12, 4, and 6. He had 4 triples and 2 steals. That's not even much better. That's a huge performance from Calderon. No point adding him for Wednesday. You're not going to be able to play him with 13 games on, and the value is not going to extend. So, good game, but don't get overly excited. Jordy Clarkson steps up when Russell's out. 18, 3, and 4 with 4 steals. And Uncle P had 17 points. He hit 4 triples, and he had 2 blocks. And he has been a real success story this season. I said before that you could consider dropping Uncle P. Not in every situation, because he is providing decent numbers. But it's just not... I don't know. It just doesn't happen in enough games for it to be worthwhile in a lot of situations. Brandon Ingram hit 3 triples for 11 points in 25 minutes. And Julius Randle, who was listed as questionable before the game with a hip pointer, he played just the 21 minutes, 3, 5, and 4. Had some horrific turnovers, horrific shooting. Not a good night from Randle. And that allowed Larry Nance to get in there. 8, 4, and 2 for Nance in 27 minutes, 2 steals and a block. And he's back to that multi-categorical form that he was in prior to his concussion. So getting back into being a 12-team streamer and not a must-hold guy, but getting back to that and playing some minutes. Randall's play has dipped a little bit as well. Speaking of play dipping, Luol Deng is dreadful at the moment, and there's no reason outside of even 16-team leagues, I think, to own him at this point. All right, that is it for Tuesday. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to look at all 13 games from Wednesday from a DFS point of view.
I saw your picture today, got me thinking about the things that I would say, but I know you're happy now and you're someplace far away, and I can't remember the way you taste. I walk down your old street, and I wonder if we'll ever meet again. Without a second glance, you turned your back, my friend. This is the end, and I can't pretend I'm ready to be your friend. So don't go, don't you know my face? I'm the one that made your heart break so long ago.
All right, guys, we're back. We'll start off with the perfect DFS lineups from Tuesday. The first one on FanDuel, Timmy Frazier at 53 and Russ at 59.1. Shooting guard, Dwayne Wade, 32.6, and Jordy Clarkson, 34.6. The small forwards, Jim Butler, 55.1, and Wilson Chandler at 34.3. Power forwards, Porzingis at 43.3. Ed Davis at 29. Must clarify that. And Yusuf Nurkic at 38.8 for a total of 379.8. On DraftKings, Timmy Frazier, 56.75. Jordy Clarkson, 35.25. Butler at 57. Lavernier at 27.25. Nurkic at 42. Westbrook at 67. Porzingis at 46.25. And Jose Calderon at 30.5 points for a total of 362 points. Now, with a slate coming up with 13 games, you're going to have your late night slates, your early slates. But if you're playing a whole 13 game slate, you're going to have really high scores, and it is going to be low game total nights, and high ones are generally harder to cash on, just because there's so much variation in them. So just bear that in mind when going to play. Don't necessarily go 100% all out on nights like this. Your 6 to 8s are probably the easiest to cash in cash games, as opposed to these huge slates where there's just a lot more variability in what can happen. So the first game we're going to take a look at, we'll look at the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. The Grizzlies are favored by 4.5. The Sixers looking to go for 5 straight in a row. Well, that's what straight means, in a row. 5 straight at home. The total is 195.5 points. We heard news that James Ennis has been ruled out for the next 2 weeks with his calf issue. Tony Allen is listed as probable with his groin problem, and Wade Baldwin, he did play today in the D-League. So I've got him listed as questionable for this one, just with the absence of Parsons, with the absence of Ennis. I think they're going to have to recall him and they're going to have to play him, but we haven't heard word of that just yet. Let's look at the point guards in this game. Mike Conley's at 7,100. He's been putting up some very impressive numbers recently. He's averaging 31 across the last 3, but 35 across the last 5. Dropped a 44 in the last game. I don't imagine the Sixers' defense of Jared Bayless and Spanish Chocolate is going to impact him too much. He's a really, really good play at 7,100. As for the Sixers point guards, well, I mentioned Bayless, I mentioned Spanish Chocolate, TJ McConnell. I don't think there's any reason to play really any of those guys on such a deep slate of games. Andy Harrison for the Grizzlies at 3,600. He's going to get some extra run. He'll play a little bit at the 2 as well, alongside Conley. So he's not a horrific play at 3,600. He's not the best, but in a tournament, maybe he gives you 25. Maybe. I think it's probably a bit of a stretch. So there's something there. At shooting guard, Tone Allen is at 3,900. He's going to have to play extra minutes. He played 31 in the last game, in the game that Ennis got injured. So he's going to have to play similar to that. He had 25 points in that game, and while I don't expect him to necessarily have the 12 points that he scored in that one, at 3,900, I expect him to get over 20 FanDuel points. And that's going to be useful for you. So I think he's a really good value play there. Gerald Henderson at 4,000 exploded in his last game, but I don't put any real faith in that. Sauce Castillo at 3,800. The cheap price is nice, but maybe in a tournament. I just don't believe his upside is high enough, though. Same thing with Hollis Thompson. The small forwards, Vince Carter, he's going to get extra run with Ennis out. 4,300 for Vince. He had 25 in the last game. 4,300's, it's not expensive, but it's also not ideal. I think I'll pass on Vince, but there is an opportunity for him to have a big one. On the flip side, you can take 4,300 on Bob Cove as well. Yes, he struggled, but he struggled in the last game and still had 26. Eventually the shots are going to fall, and he's going to come out and have 7 threes and 7 steals in a game, and he's going to blow up. So in a tournament, Bob Cove, I believe, was in the optimal lineup the last time the Sixers played as well. So at that price, in a tournament, Bob Cove is on the board. No doubt about it that he is an option. It takes a little bit of balls, but he's got some of the best upside for that low of a price. Jermichael Green has been surprisingly solid lately. He's averaging 25 in the last 3 after a real stinking string of games where he barely got to 15. He's back in business. He's at 4,300. He's an okay guy to look at. I'm not overly interested in using him. Dario Saric at 42. Yeah, struggling a little bit. He's up and down. I don't believe that this is a great opportunity for him. Ersan Ilyasova at 41. The salary has come up. He's had a few decent games in a row, but he's probably a fade for me as well. Whereas Zebo's at 5,400. It's just too high. I know what Zebo's going to give me. He's going to give me 25 points. But at 5,400, I don't know. This with the limited minutes, if something just goes wrong a little bit, he doesn't contribute in enough areas to really push you over that line. There's just too much risk involved with me playing Zebo. For the centers, we've got a couple of good ones here. Marc Gasol's at 6,800. He's been flying lately. He had 39 in his last game. He is definitely an option. And of course, the other side of things, 5,800 for the process. Joel Embiid, he is averaging 31 across the last 5. He's only going to play 24 minutes, but that doesn't really matter because the numbers continue to be there for him. So he is a good option as well. So 2 really good center plays. I want nothing to do with Jelly Okafor, and that should be pretty clear from listening to me talk about him on this podcast. All right, the next game we'll take a look at, we'll go to the San Antonio Spurs and the Charlotte Hornets. Definitely a few injury concerns here for the Hornets. We've got Trevion Graham, who's listed as probable with his Achilles issue. Jeremy Lamb is probable with his hamstring, so Lamb is probably back. Now, there's a few questionable guys. Christian Wood, Frank the Tank Kaminsky, and Cody Zeller. And they're all important because they're all big men. So there's lots of different permutations for the rotation. I didn't mean that to rhyme. Dr. Seuss here. You can check that out on our what if scenarios over on Basketball Monster. You know, who's in, who's out, how does that affect the minutes, how does that affect the usage as well, and see the projections that way. For the Spurs, they were without LaMarcus Aldridge and Tony Parker in the last game due to rest. They'll be back, so I don't think we've got really anything to be concerned about on the Spurs side of thing. Assuming that all these guys play, Kaminsky and Zeller, that's how I'll talk about this, but obviously if Zeller's out and Kaminsky plays, Kaminsky becomes a must-play guy. If both guys are out, Spencer Hawes becomes a must-play guy. So there's definitely a few options there. At point guard, Tone Parker, 4,600. Not a high salary for Parker, and actually a good matchup for him. He's coming off some decent rest. Not your worst play. Probably not your best play, but he is playing at a higher level than he was before he had that knee soreness. But he's comfortably an option, and I wouldn't have an issue with using him. Pat Mills at 3,900, no interest there. Ramon Sessions, no interest. But the big name, obviously, is Kemba Walker. He's down to 7,800, so that's a drop of $400 from his last game, because his last few games have been a little bit subpar. Spurs defense worries me slightly, so he's a fade in my mind. Nick Batum at 6,400. I think it's a decent price for Batum. I don't 100% love it on FanDuel, but on some other sites, he's not bad value. I think he gets you to 30 points fairly comfortably. Yes, there is the Kawhi defensive issue, but Batum can do things in different ways with his ability to provide defensive stats and his ability to get assists as well. That's not just all coming from scoring and shooting. Other shooting guards, Dan Green, 4,100, really hasn't got it going yet. Not really keen there. Manu, same, not interested in using him, and we won't be using Jeremy Lamb in his first game back. For the small forwards, Kawhi's at 8,500. He's been giving us 40 points a game, basically. Not quite getting to where we want at 45. Not far off it, though. He is a solid play, probably more a cash than a tournament guy. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 5,100. Continues to be sort of up and down in the reliability of what he's going to give you. Had a strong last couple of games, but the Spurs defense and Kawhi, much like it does for a lot of teams, it worries me a little bit with Kidd-Gilchrist now. Some of his value, like Batum, it comes defensively, or a lot of his value defensively and with rebound. So it's not a massive drop, but he wasn't thriving 100% before this matchup anyway. So not a strong play. Marco Bellinelli's been on fire at 4,000 in a tournament, sure, but will the return of Jeremy Lamb affect him? Now, I'd say if Lamb comes back, but we're without Kaminsky, either one of Kaminsky or Zeller, then Bellinelli's going to play, because they're going to move Kidd-Gilchrist to the 4 a little bit more and play him a little bit there as we have, instead of Kaminsky playing say Zeller's out, Kaminsky will go play the 5. That means more minutes for Kidd-Gilchrist at the 4. That means more minutes for Bellinelli to come in at the 3. So if everyone plays and I'm off Bellinelli, but if one of Kaminsky or Zeller misses, then I think Bellinelli at 4,000 is worth a look. He's been putting up some very impressive numbers, but it is very dependent on how the rest of the team goes. Marv Williams at 4,200. He's been terrible, but he's also not this terrible. I don't think he's a good player. And if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you go, Josh, I know, shut up. I know you don't think he's a good player, but he's not. But he will be better than this. At 4,200, you can't trust it, especially against a Spurs team, and it's a tough matchup. But in a tournament, maybe you get your 30. Pretty unlikely, though. I'm not overly keen on Marv, although the 4,200 salary is a significant drop down. LaMarcus Aldridge at 6,900. That salary's come down, and now this is where it gets interesting for Aldridge. At this price tag, this is we're talking business a bit more here with him. So I'm fine with that as at that price. Dave Lee had 27 in the last game, obviously fueled by Aldridge's absence, so we won't be going there. And as I mentioned before, Kaminsky, if Zala's out, smack him in. He's been playing really, really well, and he will have a huge opportunity at centre. Zala at 4,300, not a high price for Zala. I'd be okay with using him if he plays, but we don't know yet. As for Pau Gasol on the other side, he's at 6,100. It just feels marginally too high. He's got a real history of dominating the Hornets, but that came in his time with Chicago. So I'm not overly interested. The other one, obviously, Spencer Hawes will be the option if both Kaminsky and Zala happen to miss, which is a possibility at this early stage of recording. The next game we're talking about, the Portland Trailblazers and the Cleveland Cavaliers. This could be ugly because Portland's A, not good. Secondly, they're coming off a back-to-back. And thirdly, they're on the road. And fourthly, the Cavs are really good. So the Cavs are favoured by 11.5. We've got a total here of 217 points. So good total, shit spread. So we don't exactly know how it's going to pan out, but there's concerns to be had. Let's look at the point guards. Kyrie is at 7,600. He dropped a nice 46er in the last game in just 29 minutes. The defense of Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum is hardly exciting. We saw Derrick Rose and Brandon Jennings put up some monster numbers today. So Irving at 7,600, absolutely he's in play. Definitely worth a look. Lillard at 9,000. I don't want anything to... Look, I know Irving's defense isn't great, but I want nothing to do with Lillard at 9,000. He's a tournament guy only, but he is so up and down. Just the 36 today. He's only averaging 32 across his last 5. There is no way that I want to spend 9,000 on Lillard when there are 25 other starting point guards playing on Wednesday. Just not a chance. For the shooting guards, J.R. Smith is at 4,300. Hasn't got to that value since returning from his injury, but yeah, he's always worth a look in a tournament in case he gets hot. On the other side of things, CJ McCollum's at 7,500. Not quite getting there either. And second night of a back-to-back against Cleveland, I'll probably fade CJ in this situation. For the small forwards, Mo Harkless is at 45. He's always worth a look to me because he gets these defensive numbers which can really rack up some fantasy stats. LeBron at 9,800. Yeah, look, fine. I think you can get 40-ish out of LeBron. I guess it depends on the site and the salary of LeBron. On FanDuel, I'm not a huge fan, but when you see me go through the picks of the day later, I believe I've got him highlighted on one of the sites. We'll bring that up later on. But LeBron has been a little bit quiet in a couple of games, but still averaging 45 across the last 5. And I think you should have relative degrees of expectation of him doing that or getting to that level again. Evan Turner's at 4,100. Yeah, not a good matchup for him, so I think we'll leave him alone. Obviously, Mick Dunleavy, Dick Jefferson, they're not worth a look. I obviously didn't talk about Alan Crabb and Iman Shumpert for the shooting guards, and that's because I don't want to talk about them. At power forward, Channing Frye's at 3,800. He had 2 points in the last game, and he'd been flying prior to that. Great matchup. Really, big man can do some stuff against the Blazers, as we saw with Kristaps today. At 3,800 in a tournament, sure, I can see it working, but I'm not overly loving it. But I do love Kevin Love, and that's not because his name's Love. At 7,800, we talk about what Porzingis could do. Love can do very similar-ish things with his shooting, with his scoring, with his ability to have to stretch Ed Davis out or Myers Leonard out. They're going to struggle. Love at 7,800 is a very, very good play, I think. Eddie Davis at 38. Well, I talked about him before. Whether it's, is he starting and playing 33? Is he starting and playing 19? We don't know at this point. And I believe the 33 was fueled by the fact that he couldn't miss early on. And that gave him the 29 points. So 3,800, I'm not interested against this Cavs team. Yeah, there's the fact that he's starting will suck some people into it. And it might work. It did today. But going by the laws of probability, I just don't think it's a great option. Same with Myers Leonard, obviously Noah Vonleh, not good either. Tristan Thompson at 4,900 has been putting up some solid numbers, averaging 26 across the last 5, dropped 36 in the last game. The Blazers give centers a very easy go at it, so I like Thompson here. Mace Plumlee at 5,300, I think he's a solid cash game center in pretty much all formats all across all sites. I think that's a decent price. There are some other higher upside guys like the Process that we talked about earlier, but Plumlee at that sort of salary is definitely not a stay away by any means. Phoenix and Orlando, no spread released for this one yet. I guess we're waiting to see. Actually, I don't even know why there's no spread because TJ Warren and Tyson Chandler have already been ruled out for Phoenix, so we're going to be getting probably more Brandon Knight starting, some more Alex Len, which is good, some more Tyler Ulis and Alan Williams off the bench. Some interesting situations to say the least. Let's look at the point guards. Lord Alfred Payton is at 5,700, bounced back with a 35-pointer in the last game. 5,700, not high. Good matchup against the Suns' backcourt. I think he's solid. I think he's a good guy to use. DJ Augustine at minimum salary, always a tournament option, never cash though. On the Suns side of things, Eric Bledsoe dropped 53 in the last game after being a little bit down. 7,500 just feels a bit too expensive for me. Ulis and Watson we won't be using. At shooting guard, Evan Fournier at 5,300. He just feels like he's coming in 2 to 3 points under where he needs to be. I know he can get better. This is an opportunity to get better, but I'm not going to be putting my money there. Brandon Knight at 4,500, tournament only. Yeah, he played 28 minutes in the last game. He put up 11 points on FanDuel. That's terrible. But in the last 5, he's had a 44-pointer. And the opportunity, the minutes, it looks good. It's just no reliability with him whatsoever. Devin Booker at 6,100 had a nice 33-point game in the last one. I'm off him. He's not consistent enough. He's a tournament-only player, I believe. At small forward, Jeff Green.
My name is Jeff.
3,600 for Jeff. It's cheap. He had 21 in the last game, but that was comfortably his best game. He's averaging 12.8 across the last 5. I don't really see how you can justify using Jeff Green. you can't justify using Aaron Gordon either, who dropped less than 10 points in 21 minutes in the last game. He's at 4,700. He'd have to be 2,000 before I'd even consider Aaron Gordon with the way that they're currently utilising him. PJ Tucker should get some extra run with Warren out, but I'm not really keen there. He's not a big stat-stuffing guy. At power forward, Jared Dudley at 3,900. In a tournament, sure, you can have a look at Dudley, but his numbers and minutes have trended down over the last week. I like Serge Ibaka at 6,000. I think this is a good matchup for him. He's in a decent bit of form, averaging 33 across the last 5, which I don't think many people would necessarily have realised the points that he has been racking up. So at 6,000, he is a decent-ish play without being spectacular. Obviously, Marquise Chris is out of the conversation. At centre, Alex Len's at 5,200. There's risk associated with Len just because Earl Watson could go in and do the wrong thing, which he does plenty of times. But I feel confident we're going to get 26 minutes of Len, and that should be enough to give us 25 plus points. So Len is a solid play. Bismack Biyombo at 4,500 has been putting up good numbers lately. I recommended him as a play the other day. He's not a recommended play today, but he's not a terrible option. Alan Williams, big source at 4,100. Well, he had a big drop-off in the last game, so I'm not overly interested in using him. I just don't think he's that good of a player to demand and take minutes off Len on a regular basis. Nick Vucevic's salaries keeps coming down, 6,300, but he's not even getting to that level. He's not getting enough minutes. His confidence is shot. I'm assuming his faith in the organisation is pretty low as well. So Vuce is not a player that is worthy of your lineups, I don't believe. The next game we take a look at is the Atlanta Hawks, who want to bounce back after that embarrassment today, and the Indiana Pacers. No spread released, and I guess I know that's because the Pacers have CJ Miles, they have Miles Turner, they have Paul George, all listed as questionable, and Jeffy Teague is probable with his ankle sprain that he likely could have come back in on Sunday. So a few players we don't know if they're going to play or not, and that obviously changes things up. If George and Miles are out, we're looking at Glenn Robinson III as the major beneficiary. If Miles Turner is out, you get a bump for... if those guys are out, Jeffy Teague gets a bump, Thad Young gets a bump. We see Kevin Seraphin getting a bump. If Miles Turner happens to be out, he grabbed 14 boards in the last game and proved once again that Al Jefferson is finished. For the point guards, let's hope Teague plays because we're going to have Schroeder on Teague, and I think that's a very interesting matchup. Schroeder bounced back today, had 29 points. He's at 5,500. As with all these situations, he could either force it and be terrible, or he could be fired up and put up some big numbers against his former mentor. 5,500 for Schroeder, I think, is a decent play, but I'd probably leave him for a tournament. I wouldn't trust it in a cash format. As for Teague, one of these guys is out, Turner, Miles, or George. At 7,000 for Teague, I think it's worth looking. Now, it could be a fade situation in a tournament that lots of people will be on if Paul George is out, but otherwise, in cash, I think it's okay. Malcolm Delaney, Aaron Brooks, no interest in those guys. At shooting guard, Monte Ellis at 5,500, really stunk in the last game, just the 7 points, only played 23 minutes. I don't think he's worth 5,500. Timmy Hardaway's at 36, he's always just a tournament-only gamble. Kyle Korver, the same thing at 3,800. And Rod Stuckey, who dropped 26 in the last game, I don't think we'll be putting much faith in that happening again. Small forwards, Bazemore, will he do better than the 3.7 he had today? Undoubtedly, yes. Is he good? No. Plenty of other options ahead of Bazemore. Tabo Cephalosha, 4,400. No. 8,600 for Paulie George. Yeah, look, I don't think so. Coming off an ankle injury, if he even plays, I don't think we'll use him. Same with CJ Miles with a knee problem. At power forward, Paulie Millsap, 7,800. Good matchup. This is a great opportunity for Millsap to get back on the horse. I think we could see a 40-ish sort of performance from him here. Mike Muscala's not going to be used. Thad Young, if Turner or George happens to be out, then I'm more interested in Young at 5,700. And I think he'd ought not quite be a lock, but there's very few locks on a day with 13 players as well. Seraphin, as I mentioned, at 3,600. Turner's out. You can look to him as a cheap power forward option. At centre, Dwighty Howard at 8,100. Didn't get it done today. Just played the 19 minutes, though, obviously, because it was such a smashing. At 8,100, it just feels just a tad expensive. There are other centres on the board. We'll see Boogie, Towns, Whiteside, other guys that I'd prefer in that 8,000 to 9,000 range over Dwight. Miles Turner at 6,200. Centers do struggle in general against the Hawks. 6,200. If Paul George is out, I would consider it with Miles Turner. I think he'd be a decent play, but not a brilliant one. So not a high priority guy for me. The next game we're looking at, the Miami Heat taking on the Detroit Pistons. We've got the Pistons favored by 4.5 and a brutally low spread of brutally low total of 189.5 points. Let's look at we know Justice Winslow's already out of this one as well, by the way. Let's look at the point guards. Goran Dragic is at 6,700. Just too expensive for me. It is a good matchup. Ish Smith has been allowing point guards to put up some numbers. It's just a bit too expensive for me for Goran. As for Ish at 5,400, no upside, but I believe in cash, he's been almost hitting value most of these games, averaging 26 across the last 3. That's almost there. There are better options out there. I think you can go better than using Ish Smith. Beno, James Ellsworth, Udry at minimum salary. No, I just wanted to drop the James Ellsworth gag in there again. At shooting guard, Joshie Richardson, he was brutally bad in the last game. Had 12 points with one actual point. At 4,300 in a tournament, sure, he's fine to get back on in a tournament, but don't have huge confidence in it. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, big game against Houston. That generally for him starts a run of big games. So at 4,800, he definitely has tournament upside. Dion Waiters, 5,200. It's very, very hard to not use Dion Waiters at this point. He's giving you 30 points a game on most nights. The salary is decent. Until Justice Winslow comes back, I'm on board with Dion Waiters. Rod Magruder, Reg Bullock, no thanks. Small forwards, Marcus Morris, he has zero intrigue for me in this one. Jim Johnson at 4,000 for the Heat. Had been playing a lot of minutes at power forward, didn't in the last game, really limited to just 17. There are much better options or much more reliable options out there than James Johnson. Power forward Toby Harris, he had a real stinker in the last one, and he'd been struggling a little bit before that. This is an opportunity for him, but with such a low total in this game, I don't love it. I think in a tournament there's something to be said for using Toby, but he's probably one of the only guys you'd look at in this game. Johnny Lua at 4,500, just not enough upside to be used there. And obviously Derek Williams, the starting power forward for Miami, he's not an enticing guy either. At the center position, we've got Andre Drummond at 8,100. I don't like it here. I don't like the matchup against Whiteside. He could really get destroyed. As for Whiteside at 9,200, well, he has been destroying basically everyone. His lowest score in the last 5 is 47 points. So if he did just 47 points, that's beating value at 9,200. I like Whiteside at this price, and this is why I said before, Dwight Howard at 8,100, forget about it. I'll take an extra 1,000, I'll take Hassan, and I'll get myself 45 points, pretty much guaranteed. And I think there's a real opportunity for him to have another monster performance. Aaron Baines is never going to be in play unless Drummond is out. The next game, we've got Boston and Brooklyn. The Celtics traveling to Brooklyn. The Celtics are favoured by 7.5, and the total is 214.5 points. Jay Crowder is the one we want to watch. He sat out the second half, or almost the entire second half, of Monday's game with that ankle swelling up again. Never a good sign. So there's a real chance that he misses here. They give him a couple more days off, and that's going to increase the value of someone like Marcus Smart. I wouldn't be using Crowder anyway, but Smart would definitely have some interest if Crowder happens to miss. For the point guards, two Isaiahs here. Isaiah Thomas at 8,200. Good matchup for him. He just seems to be under on a lot of days. I think he's a tournament guy, but definitely not a high priority player. Isaiah, the net situation, Isaiah Whitehead, Yogi Ferrell, I don't think any of those guys are really even worth considering. Terry Rozier's had some decent games at 3,700, and if Crowder's out, you might throw him into a tournament. I hope he gives you a 21 or 22, but really, I think you're clutching at straws. Shooting guard Avery Bradley at 6,700. The play has significantly dropped since Al Horford has been back. Now, with Jay Crowder potentially out, you'd maybe cast a glance towards Bradley. But if Crowder plays, I don't think there's any way you can spend 6,700 on Avery, whose numbers have significantly dropped off. Shawnee Kilpatrick is also not in play. He's averaging 12 across the last 3. Really, really struggling at this point. For the small forwards, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is at 4,000. Not bad. there are going to be better options out there, but he's not a write-off. He can have some decent games. We've seen that. He can have some stinkers, but this is an opportunity against Boston, a high-paced, shorter game with a team whose defense is lacking. And if Crowder's out, then I'm a little bit more interested in Hollis Jefferson. No interest in Crowder. Marcus Smart is listed as a small forward now on FanDuel. He's at 5,200. Only caring there if Crowder is out, and even then not caring to a huge degree. And Bojan Bogdanovic at 4,300, we know that his MO is I am only a tournament player. At power forward, Amir Johnson, cannot trust it. Yes, he's at 3,700, but no for me. 5,200 for Trev Booker, not quite getting to the level that he needs to get to. I think you can find better options at power forward. And Jonas Jerebko, the other power forward on the board here, he's barely worth mentioning. At centre, Brookie Lopez at 7,300. Really putting up some big numbers recently, Brook. I think he's all right at centre. There's some other options out there, obviously at the position, Embiid and Gasol and Whiteside and Towns, but Lopez in that middle price range is someone to consider. Al Horford at 7,200. Is he a better option than Lopez? I would probably prefer Lopez marginally, but Horford's been fantastic since returning from his concussion, putting up big numbers, averaging almost 40 across the last three. So both of those guys are in consideration. I would lean towards Lopez just slightly, and we're not touching Kelly Olynyk until he figures out what to do, because he's been dreadful over the last week. The Toronto Raptors and the Houston Rockets. We've got the Rockets favoured by 3.5 points here. The total is 217.5. Let's look at the point guard situation. Pat Bev for the Rockets, 4,500. No thanks. 8,600 for Kyle Lowry. Not bad. I think that against his former team, 40 points-ish is about right for Lowry. I think he's going to play some pretty big minutes. Not the best point guard out there, but there's some use for him. Corey Joseph, not interesting either. Jim Harden, 11,600. Fine. Yeah, he's when you've got some cheap options around him, get him in. 50 plus, 70 point upside. It's pretty impressive, and he'd want to rebound from a game where he wasn't awesome, yet still put up 50 points. DeMar DeRozan at 9,400. The pricing between these two is going to vary on your site, obviously, as to which one is going to be the better value. DeRozan is okay at that price. You should be looking at 40-ish or 40-plus points from him. Whether it's enough to justify his salary depends on your team, but he's not a must-play on FanDuel. Eric Gordon at 5,200, I don't like that salary for him. At small forward, Trev Ariza at 5,200. I reckon he's all right at that price. There's some value in using him. Had a few quiet games, but bounced back with a nice one in that game against Detroit a couple of days ago. Terrence Ross, Damari Carroll, who'll be back for this one. He missed the last one due to rest, forcing Norm Powell back to the bench. I don't want to use either of those guys. And Sammy Deck has been putting up some nice numbers, but it's not enough for us to use in DFS. At power forward, Ryan Anderson has been terrible. He's at 4,700. 3,700, I'd say, yeah, sure. 4,700, there's an opportunity for him, no doubt, because the minutes are there. The shooting hasn't been, but it can be. But he just does so little in the other areas that it just requires a hot night, and that makes it tournaments only for me. And even then, it's a stretch. Patrick Patterson at 4,200. I don't want to deal with him, nor with Pascal Siakam. At centre, my boy Clint Capella, love it. 5,700 for Clint, averaging 35 across his last five. His lowest score in his last five has been 28. The minutes are there, the production's there, the confidence is there, all aboard. 6,200 for Jonas. I think there's value in using Jonas as well in this matchup. Centers have been able to put up some decent fantasy stats against Houston. And Valanciunas has got his minutes back. He's averaging almost 35 points across the last three games. I would prefer Capella, but I can understand a situation where you would try use Valanciunas and see how it works out for you. He's definitely not a stay-away type player. The Los Angeles Clippers and the Dallas Mavericks. We've got DeAndre Jordan returning to Dallas. Could be some hacking issues going on, almost definitely. But we look at the questionable situation in Dallas. We've got Dirk, Bogut, Darren Williams, all listed as questionable. So multiple ways that this can go for Dallas. I think we're using Seth Curry regardless, and he gets extra bump, obviously, if Darren doesn't play. But Seth has value even if Williams does play. 4,700 for Seth. Had a nice 29-pointer in the last game. He's look, if Darren plays, I probably tournament him only. If Darren's out, though, he's a cash and tournament worthwhile looking guy. I didn't even talk about the other point guards. I wouldn't be using Williams if he plays. Austin Rivers, we're no closer to getting consistent numbers out of him. And 9,300 for Chrissy Paul. Big numbers from Paul. Dallas has somehow been able to restrict opposition point guards significantly in most of the games that they've played. So that's a little bit of a strike against using Chris Paul, but I think that you can get 40 points out of him. The other concern is if these guys miss, the Clippers have been that good that this could be over by half time. So Paul might play 28 minutes. That makes him risky, and that makes him someone that I might just look at in a tournament. But even then, just too many other options on the board. Shooting guard, Wes Matthews at 4,700. I'm not interested. JJ Redick at 47. He's been playing well, but it doesn't translate to DFS points all that well, so he's a stay away. Actually, he's not a full stay away. He's close to it. 3,700 for Jamal Crawford. Nah, no interest in him either. For the small forwards, the pencil at 6,000. The pencil becomes interesting if Dirk is out. If Dirk is in, then he is a fade. Justin Anderson, minimum salary, and there's a reason for that. Wes Johnson, Luke Marmute, Dorian Finney-Smith are the other small forwards that don't really deserve our consideration. John Gibson's the other guy that I forgot to mention. He's at 3,700. In a tournament, if Darren is out, you can look at Gibbo, but yeah, really stunk it up in the last game as Curry got the majority of that playing time and those shot attempts. At power forward, Mo Spates is a minimum salary guy who is a worth a tournament look, especially considering the game might be a blowout. He gets a couple extra minutes, he gets hot, he gets 15 or so in a quarter. That's what Mo can do. But I'm not overly interested in it, obviously. Dwight Powell, no thanks. Blake Griffin, the same reasons as Chris Paul. He's been awesome, Griffin. He's been putting up 49 across the last 3. But the blowout concern is a real concern. I wouldn't be using Dirk even if he played. At centre, DeAndre Jordan, 6,600. Not an expensive price for Jordan. Blowout is a risk, but I think that you should feel fairly confident about getting 32 to 33 out of Jordan in this game against Dallas, and he'll look to do some good stuff, I hope. Bogut, 4,300. We don't think that he's playing at this point. He is questionable, but yeah, I don't think you'd be using him even if he did happen to suit up and get out there. Denver and Utah. No spread is released at the time of recording. Injury-wise, it's all on Utah's side. We've got Georgie Hill, who's questionable with that ongoing thumb issue, but it looks like he might be ready to go. And Joey Johnson is ill. He is questionable with an illness, so we'll see how that goes. Although the last couple of guys who have been ill and played have put up big numbers, so I don't really know what to make of that. Let's look at the point guard situation. Hill at 6,300. I find it really hard. It's a great matchup, but I find it really hard to use him, considering we probably won't know his status, and if we do, how's he going to fit in this sort of, not new, but with everyone back. We've seen one game of it. That's a risk with Georgie Hill, but as you'll see later, I believe, when we talk about the Australian sides, his salary is rock bottom, and he's obviously in play there if he happens to get up and be ready to go. Jameer Nelson at 3,600. He dropped 24 today. I wouldn't be relying upon that. Over the last 5, he's averaging just 16 points in 29 minutes. That's 21 points per 36. So the fact that he got more points than minutes today is a significant outlier for him. Jamal Murray at 3,800. Monster today. He's actually averaging 22 across the last 5. I wouldn't say it's the best matchup in a low-paced game against Utah. Probably a fade to me. Some people will be on him at 3,800, but I think he's probably a fade here. Dante Exum, who would get the start if George Hill is out, he won't be worth using. And Emmanuel Mudiay at 6,100, just not the best matchup, and he's been so sort of flaky in his form. Rod Hood, 5,600, not quite for Rod, but it is a good matchup. So I can see a situation where I will use Rod, but not in every lineup for sure. Will Barton, not a chance. Small forward, Gordy Hayward, 7,100. Yeah, that's okay for Gord. I think that there's value in using him, more a cash than a tournament. And same with the Rooster at 6,000. I think you should feel relatively confident of getting 27 to 30 points out of him most nights that he goes out there. Now, if Joey Johnson happens to be out, and Georgie Hill happens to be out, we're going to be looking at a lot of Dante Exum, but a lot of Joe Ingles. I got my Aussies mixed up. Ingles at 3,500. If we see Johnson and Hill out, 3,500 for Ingles. Yeah, not a horrific tournament option that will possibly be low owned. Maybe not be a great option. What I think we'll see then is we'll see more Shelvin Mack at point guard. Dante moves across to the 2 a little bit and plays some there as well. But Ingles would have marginal appeal. So don't write him off completely. Power forward Nick Jokic, another 26-point game today. He's basically got 26 points over the last 3 games. He is at 4,500, and at 26 points, that's making back value. Now, against Utah, it's a little bit of a concern, just given the slower pace of the games. But I think Jokic is in play. The salary hasn't risen, and getting 24 points out of him, it's 5x value. And I think that given what we've seen from him, he's right on track to sort of continue to do that. He's playing well. It's just a minutes distribution thing at the moment that's the concern. There's still risk with him, obviously. Trey Lyles had Boris Diaw back last game, so he stunk. 21 minutes for Lyles in 14 points. He's at 4,200. Sure, there's a tournament chance there, but it's not one I'll be using. He just hasn't really thrived in any situation where he's had to share that starting role with Boris Diaw. As for Diaw, we don't care about using him. Ken Fareed at 6,000, and no chance in hell of using him at $6,000. For the centres, Yusuf Nurkic is at 4,900. That's a great bargain centre. There's obviously risk associated with it, and in a cash game there's much more risk. But in a tournament, he's averaging 30 across the last 3. He had almost 40 today, and at 4,900, there's great value. But he could play 18 minutes. We just don't know exactly what Malone will do. But the price is good enough to take that risk. Rudy Gobert, 6,700. I want nothing to do with Gobert at 6,700. It's just too expensive for what he provides on most nights. We're getting through these 13 games, guys. It's been there's a lot to talk about, clearly. Minnesota and New Orleans. The Pelicans are favored by 1, looking for their 4th consecutive victory. The total here is 210 points. Anthony Davis, we assume that he's going to play. That's why they put him back into the game against Atlanta when the game was over, just to test it out for today. He played. He was fine. So you'd imagine he's ready to go, but obviously bruises. Let's see how it goes. Let's see. The last time he had a bruise on his thigh, it ended up on his calf, so there's obviously some clotting issues with Anthony Davis. Let's see how this one works out for him. Fingers crossed. At point guard, Timmy Frazier, 5,400. Well, he's not going to drop 53 again, but I'm pretty confident that he gets to 25 plus. So I like him as a point guard option in multiple different scenarios. Rick Rubio at 6,200, it just pales in comparison as opposed to 5,400 for Timmy Frazier. So I don't imagine Rubio is going to be a must-play guy in many areas. And Drew Holiday at 79, just way too high in FanDuel. You look at the Moneyball price, you look at the DraftKings price, they're much more reasonable. Not using him at 7,900, despite how well he's played, it's too expensive. Zachary Levine at 58. Love the matchup for Zach. He's been a little bit down. This is a great tournament play, I believe, with Zach. I think this is a real opportunity here for him to hit some big shots and drop 35, even 40 points perhaps in this game. So there's a big one here for Zach, I believe. Each-one more is unreliable with this return of Drew. Bud Hield and Brandon Rush are obviously not going to be anywhere near our lineups. Wigo is at 6,700, has really, really stunk the last couple of games. I think he's due for a bounce back, so I'm on board with Wigo at 6,700. I think there's some value in using him, and I'm not sure how many people will be on him. Solly Hill, Dante Cunningham, Shabazz Muhammad, the other small forwards, and clearly they're not worth using. Gorgie Jeng at 5,700, been putting together some nice numbers recently. Pelicans front court, and someone questioned me today on this. I said, you mentioned that Paul Millsap was going to be a good play against the Pelicans. I did say that. It turned out to be horribly wrong because the Pelicans smashed them. But they said, how can you say that Millsap will be a good option? This is before the game, that they weren't having a go at me after the game. They weren't having a go at me at all during the tweet. They said, how did you say that Millsap is worth it, playing against the Pelicans, because the Pelicans allow power forwards to have big numbers when he's going up against Anthony Davis? Now, Anthony Davis has a lot of steals. Anthony Davis blocks a lot of shots. But his defense is not awesome. And people playing against him do put up big fantasy numbers. Davis puts up huge ones, and he blocks a lot of shots, but he's not an engulfing defender he's not Kawhi. So when Kawhi goes on someone, that player doesn't score fantasy points. Anthony Davis might go out there and get blocks and get steals, but his opponent gets fantasy stats. So that's what I mean. So that when we look at Gorgie Jeng here against a Davis who might be a little bit banged up and might have to take on a bit more Terrence Jones, I like Jeng at 5,700. Been playing big minutes and the production's been following. As for Jones at 5,100, I think we look at it. Even if Davis does play, there's something to be said for using Jones. Probably if Davis does play, you'd restrict Jones to a tournament. If Davis is out, then it's Jones in lots of different spots. 11,600 for Tony Davis. Obviously today he only scored 24, and that dropped his 3-game average to 52. That's how big he'd been prior to that. assuming we hear positive news out of him, I'm okay with using Davis. I'll assume the risk. Nemanja Bjelica, no chance. Centers, Karl Anthony Towns, 8,700. The Towns-Davis matchup, which we'll see at times, is going to be really enthralling. He had 56 in the last one, Towns. His previous games against the Pelicans, he's averaging 48 points in 32 minutes, 8,700 for Towns. The salary's jumped by $700, so it's a big jump. It doesn't rule him out completely, but he is in that mix with guys like Whiteside for being options at the center position. 2 more games to go. We've got the Los Angeles Lakers now taking on the Golden State Warriors. No spread released at the time of recording. Julius Randle, they seem to think he'll be ready to go with that hip pointer that had him questionable before today's game. They said, look, he was a little bit limited, but they said, look, everything looks like he's ready to go, but obviously check back. And we'll talk about that in just a second. In terms of Golden State, no real injury concerns there. We know that D'Angelo Russell is out of this game, so we're going to get another Jose Calderon start. I don't believe we're going to get another Jose Calderon game where he plays and scores big numbers like he did in today's game. But at 3,500, maybe you'd look at it and say, hey, if he gets me 22, I'm pretty happy with it. Steph is at 8,800. The last time Steph played the Lakers, they were beaten and Steph didn't hit a 3. I think he'll be pissed. I think you're going to be looking at a 40-ish FanDuel fantasy night from Steph and probably up to 45. I think this is a good opportunity for him. And we know that he's got not pride issues, but he's going to want to come out and hit threes in these guys' faces. No doubt in my mind. Shooting guard, Jordy Clarkson, 4,900. Yep, he's fine to use with Russell out. Definitely a good option. Klay Thompson at 6,000. The salary is rising for Klay. I think he's a solid-ish guy, more a cash than a tournament guy. Lou Williams at 5,100 with no didn't have the greatest game today, but with no Russell at 5,100, he is in play as well. Swaggy P, Uncle P, 4,200. Yeah, not bad value from Uncle. I don't think I'd be using him, but I can understand why you would. At small forward, Durant at 9,900. Fine. Yeah, you're going to get 45 out of him on most nights, so he's in play. Brandon Ingram, not yet. Plays well, doesn't accumulate stats. At power forward, Larry Nance. This is the business here. 3,900 for Nance, especially with Randall potentially either not going or not being at full tilt. Then Nance is going to be out there putting up some numbers. 3,900 makes him almost a lock on this slate. Draymond at 8,000 I think has got value as well, just to get 38 to 40 points. And we can't discount the Warriors playing against their former assistant coach narrative with Luke Walton as well. So there's something to be said that some of these guys might drop some big performances, and I think Draymond could be one of those players. As for Randall, just too highly priced for me, especially with the hip injury. At centre, Tim Mozgov, Zaza Pachulia, Tariq Black, and JaVale McGee. They will have no business being on anyone's DFS lineup, I don't believe. The last game of the night, we've got the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the Sacramento Kings. The Kings are favoured by 2.5, and the total here is 208 points. $4,000 for Ty Lawson. He started the last game. He only dropped 16 or 17 points, but at $4,000, he's a cheap point guard that I do really like. So I think that he is definitely in play. Darren Collison at 6,100 just feels a little bit highly priced, so I'm not massively keen on Colo there. 11,600 for Russ. Good matchup. He's coming off a back-to-back, but yeah, he's fine. I would rather spend my money in other areas, like Harden, like Whiteside, than necessarily Russ, but we know what Russ is going to give us. If we're set on spending up on a point guard, he's going to be the one ahead of Chris Paul, ahead of Dame Lillard, ahead of those sort of guys. At shooting guard, we're talking about Vic Oladipo at 5,900. Yeah, the numbers for him have been pretty solid. I think he's in play against the Kings. Your backcourt of Collison and Lawson, there's a lot to like about Oladipo there as well. Aflalo had a big game in the last one. I don't put any faith in that. And Ben McLemore, Alex Abrunez, Anthony Morrow, they're just not going to play enough. Matty Barnes at 4,000. Played a lot of minutes and racked up 11 points. That is not what he normally does. You should be able to get 22 to 23 out of Barnes with a 30-point upside. So at 4,000, fine. Another great cheap option. I love Rudy Gay at 7,200 as well against this Thunder team. I think that there's 35 in the offing for him pretty comfortably, to be honest. I don't like Andre Robertson, and Jeremy Grant is no real interest to me. Power forwards, Sabonis, he starts, but he does nothing. This could be it, though. It's a really good ease ranking for the power forwards against the Kings. In a tournament, maybe you get lucky, because he has had a 30-pointer at one point. It's just highly unlikely. Enes Kanter, don't like the matchup for him here at 4,800. I think he is a guy to fade. Not keen there. And the centers, Steve Adams at 4,900. Playing against Boogie, not a great situation. Get into foul trouble pretty easily. As for Boogie, he's at 10,000. I think he is definitely worth looking at, and you should be able to get close to racking up 50 points with Boogie. The other guy to consider is Joffrey Lavernier at 3,700. 2 games in a row with a significantly increased role for the Thunder. And he can get you 24, 25 points. So he is a very, very cheap center option who is producing in limited minutes, and that can be very useful. So do consider Joffrey. All right, that is the 13 games done. Man, the next podcast tomorrow is going to be a monster. We're going to have to review all 13 games, and then we're going to have to preview 15 games. It's going to last you 2 days, so you split that podcast up into 2 days. Listen to it twice, get the download numbers right up. Listen to it on both days just to keep yourself in the mood. Delete it, re-download it. That's a good idea. Let's look at the picks of the day now. FanDuel, Ty Lawson 4,000, Timmy Frazier 54, Russ 11,600. 4 shooting guards, Tone Allen 3,900, I won't go to Jim now. Lou Williams 51 and Jim Harden 11,600. For the small forwards, Matty Barnes 4,000, Rudy Gay 72 and Durant at 9,900. For the power forwards, Larry Nance at 3,900, Kevin Love at 78 and Draymond at 8. And the centers, Tristan Thompson 49, Clinty Capella 57 and Boogie at 10,000. Over on DraftKings, Ty Lawson 4,000, Timmy Frazier 52 and Steph at 89. Shooting guards, Tone Allen 33, Batum at 61 and Harden at 11.7. Small forwards, Barnesy at 4,000, that's Matty Barnes. The Rooster at 5,600 and LeBron at 9,500. For the power forwards, Jokic 46, Love 77, Cousins 9,900. And the centers, Eddie Davis 32, DeAndre Jordan 63 and Karl Anthony Towns 8,400. Onto the Aussie sites now. We look at Moneyball first. Tone Parker is at 3,600 there. Love that price. Timmy Frazier 51 and Lowry at 85. For the shooting guards, J.R. Smith is minimum salary 3,500. Zachary Levine 53 and DeRozan at 9,000. For the small forwards, Matty Barnes 38, Rudy Gay 66 and LeBron at 9,200. For the power forwards, if he plays, I said I wouldn't like to play Dirk, but Dirk is at minimum salary. So if Dirk plays, you are playing him at 3,500. Serge is at 5,100 and Tony Davis is at 10,600. And the centers, Joel Embiid 47, Clint Capella 54 and Hassan Whiteside 91. On Draft Stars, we've got Seth Curry, for the Mavericks at 5,850. Drew is at 10,100 and Kyle Lowry is at 14,200. For the shooting guards, Uncle P is minimum salary, Lou Williams 83 and Jim Harden at 20,750. For the small forwards, Wilson Chandler 6,950, a huge bargain there. The Roosters at 9,050 and LeBron at 16,650. For the power forwards, minimum salary at Allen Williams, definitely just a tournament guy though. Rudy Gay 11,300 and Tony Davis 17,850. And the centers, minimum salary Ed Davis 8,900 for the process and DeMarcus Cousins $16,400. We're done. The podcast is over. Reminder, another way to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/redrock_bball. Leave a review on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Share social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, in person. Whisper it into your friend's ear and then lick them. Tell them all about the podcast. We're done. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Anthony Davis.